welcome back to another episode of the Unofficial Companion Podcast to HBO Max's hit show, Industry. I'm Jen.
I'm Kristen.
And we are the Wall Street Skinny, two lifelong friends, former investment bankers, and teachers who are here to break down everything in your favorite show, from the finance to the romance, and to give you the skinny on what's real life and what's Hollywood. This is Season 3, Episode 2, Smoke and Mirrors. Now, Kristen, I don't know about you, but immediately when I hear about smoke and mirrors, I think about magic tricks and things designed to deceive people.
Yes.
And it's funny because we were just at my in-laws' house and my father-in-law had ordered off of like Amazon or something like that, a whole bunch of these like kids magic tricks to do with my kids. And it's so funny because I think kids have this like engineering impulse more than they do. Like it's a curiosity and it's like, how does everything work impulse?
Yes.
More than they have a storytelling impulse. And I think this is kind of thematic for this episode. My kids would always be like, oh, mommy, here's the trick. Now let me tell you how it's done. And my father-in-law would be like, no. It's about putting on a show. You have to tell this whole story. You have to come up with a magic word or whatever. It's about the storytelling. It's not about the secret to the trick. And so I was thinking of that this entire episode. And I think that actually is very much aligned with the themes that we're going to get into today. So let's kick it off.
All right. Well, so the opening scene, actually, I'm going to just remind us, last episode, we saw that Lumi, Henry Muck's company, this green energy company, was going public. You know, they were at the London Stock Exchange. The IPO was about to price and all the power goes out and people are scrambling. And so somebody says, there's a slight technical problem. And Henry, the CEO, he's like, well, are we trading? What's going on? Did somebody get a photo of me? Clearly not realizing that this is so much bigger than just snapping a photo. And he finally looks at Robert and says, are we fucking open? And then we go over to the trading floor. So again, tons of panic and confusion. And Eric screams, whatever this confusion is, do not let people sell into it. Hammer the price, party line, any decline or softness in the stock price now is a buying opportunity. And so you have all the salespeople, right? They're all scrambling because none of the clients know if their orders were filled or not. And so Eric is telling people, don't let anyone sell the stock. Rishi is saying he's a buyer of Lumi only. And so I'm going to talk a little bit later. We're going to get into like this idea that with a IPO, the underwriters, one of their jobs is to support the stock price. So you are not only obviously going out and matching the buyers and finding the buyers, helping them facilitate the roadshow and all that kind of fun stuff. They're also post IPO, making sure that the share price doesn't shit the bed, for lack of a better term. And so Venetia is saying like nobody knows if they have orders or not. Let me pause for a second to see, Jen, if there's anything you wanted to touch on before we get into
there's a number of different things going on in this scene that we should talk about from a verisimilitude standpoint. So first of all, just because there's a power outage doesn't mean like the markets stop trading.
Yeah.
Not only is that not a real risk, but as you see on the trading floor at Pierpoint, the power basically flashes off and flashes back on extremely quickly at any of these investment banks, hedge funds, et cetera, et cetera. Lessons were learned 2 decades, or I guess a quarter of a century ago during 9/11 about business continuity, ranging from having backup generators and things like that to actually having like offsites where like everything is ready to go and flip a switch in a second. During 9/11, I started my career at Lehman Brothers. The guys who were at Lehman, their headquarters were being built right next to the World Trade Center. And I guess the helicopter landing pad that was atop the World Trade Center took out their headquarters when it fell off the building, when the building collapsed. And so a lot of my then subsequent coworkers, they had no place to go, but they were still executing trades off of cell phones, which was, new technology at the time. They were pricing things on pieces of graph paper. So the markets stay open no matter what happens unless they're shut down. A power outage would not actually have this like catastrophic impact on trading that's portrayed here. And I get it. We need a story. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, well, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later too. What does is when something goes wrong at the actual exchanges, which I had reached out to you and I was like, this seems like they based this on what happened with the Facebook IPO. And Jen was actually working at Morgan Stanley at the time. And like Morgan Stanley was one of the lead underwriters on the Facebook IPO. And it was, again, an epic disaster. So we're going to come back to that. But 100%, like this idea that there's a power outage and that's going to cause the issue, Yeah, that's a little
right, exactly. Especially because the lights come almost immediately back on, and they're saying this was a power outage that impacted like most of London,
the national
right? So
grid.
the national grid, exactly. So there was a little bit of verisimilitude lost there. But what I will say is that when there are natural disasters or things that all of a sudden are unexpected, there can be very real trading consequences. So that is something that's right. A power outage probably wouldn't do it, but I was on the trading floor at Morgan Stanley in, I think it was 2011, when there was an earthquake that was felt in New York City. And I just thought it was somebody, the way that the trading floors were stacked at the time was we were on a level kind of cantilevered over another floor below us with a big open staircase linking the two. And so if somebody very large walked behind me, occasionally the floor would vibrate. So I just thought somebody large was walking behind me and the floor was vibrating. And then all of a sudden I looked around and I realized everything was vibrating and it was an actual earthquake. And what happens is the market starts to react. And I remember an extremely senior portfolio manager, whom I will not name, but who is part of perhaps the most famous macro hedge fund of all time. He's one of the initials in the acronym that was the name of the fund. But he called up the desk and asked them to make him a two-way on like $1.01 million of treasuries. And you could see the wheels turning in the treasury trader's mind. It's like, okay, is this actually like an earthquake that's hitting Manhattan and this is going to be a real thing? If so, treasuries are going to go bid. Or is this a huge fade in a flight to quality trade and I should skew the market because he's probably going to sell into any strength? And that's exactly what he did. He skewed the market and the guy hit his bid. So there you will see trading activity around events like this. But the idea that a power outage would be this, every single client would be freaking out. Like the phones were working enough for them to call to freak out. Like,
I agree. But actually going back, just because I do think a lot of this was based on the Facebook IPO, which Facebook went public back May 18th, 2012. And it was one of the most anticipated IPOs in history. And at the time, it was one of the largest tech IPOs ever. And so what went wrong there, well, there was a number of things that went wrong. But so what happened is on the day of the IPO, because there was such a large, almost like, I don't want to say oversupply, but NASDAQ's trading platform glitched. And so there was delays in order confirmations. Many investors didn't know if their trades went through. And so it was just like massive widespread confusion. And so this technical failure then also led to a lack of confidence from investors. Now, there was also some issues as well that kind of also parallel what we see with this like Lumi IPO, in the sense that the underwriters went out initially at what's called price talk. So when they're initially trying to figure out where should we value this business, I had said in I think the last episode, this is it's a pricing discussion. They do their valuation, but then ultimately it is the investors who set the price. It is based on supply and demand. So they went out at what's called this price talk, where they say, we think we're going to go public at a share price of say $28 to $35. However, because again, people were so excited, they then upped the range to call it $34 to $38 a share. And so from a valuation standpoint of the entire business, it went from something like $75 billion valuation to call it $100 billion valuation. And it ultimately priced at the high end of the range. Now, the other thing that they did though, is they increased the number of shares. So they basically, right before the IPO was about to go through, they increased the number of shares by 25%. So again, this goes back to the same thing that we saw happen with Lumi, where they had that other investor who's like, now I'm going to sell. So they had an increase in number of shares, flooded the market with supply. And then because there was, again, this mismatch of investor demand, the share price came down. So I think it dropped to something like $31. And then now, today it's in the like $700-800 range. I think actually I should probably have looked up exactly where it's trading, but there's so many parallels with that Facebook IPO that I did want to touch on that, because I do think that was inspiration for this story.
Yeah. And another thing that's happening here, that was great analysis, Kristen. Talking about, I'd love if you could talk a little bit about the green shoe and talk about the trader's role to support it. But what's kind of frustrating watching this scene is Eric is screaming at everyone what the narrative is, right? It's all about selling the story, that any weakness is a buying opportunity, right? That this thing is going to the moon. We have this target price of 480 that we're trying to close at, all this fun stuff. And Rishi keeps saying, I'm a buyer only of Lumi. It's one thing to say what your view is, like, hey, I'm buying on any weakness personally, but you can't say I won't price any bids, right? No one asked me for my bid on this stock. I'm a buyer only. Doesn't make sense. Right.
Well, and I was confused as well because, by the way, like if other people want to buy, isn't that putting upward pressure as well? So like he has to kind of facilitate that as,
well, he should be facilitating all offers. Him saying, I am a buyer only. He's talking about his view, but he should be wanting to make offers.
Yes. Well, I think it's not so much because that's his view. I think what it's more, it's the support mechanism. So
no, I'm saying it's not his actual personal view. She doesn't give a shit.
Right. Exactly. No, sorry, but that he thinks that he will make money for the desk by buying. He's basically trying to do his job of
he's doing his job. He's saying my role here is to only
100%.
support the stock.
So
but I'm not here to price bids on any stock that anyone's trying to unload on me. I don't want to see it.
But so one of the things, like I said at the very beginning, is that in addition to the role of helping to do everything that goes into the IPO, they are also providing this post-IPO support for the stock price. And so one of the mechanisms that they use is something called a green shoe. So this is a little bit confusing sometimes the first time you hear about it, but I want to go through it. The main idea is that if you have, like, pretend you're going to sell 100 shares for the client. Instead of selling 100 shares, what happens on day one is the underwriters will actually sell 115 shares. So they've oversold by 15 shares. Now, what that then means is that they have sold short 15 shares. And because of that, if the share price does go below, say, the IPO price, they need to go back in the market and they need to buy those 15 shares. So it's almost like a little bit of a safety net for them. And you might say to yourself, why the heck are they doing that? Well, it's twofold. So in addition to having sold more than what they should have, they also have this option with the company. The company says, we will issue that many more shares if we need it. So if the share price does well, pretend they go out and the share price is, call it 480 and it goes to, call it 520, great. PurePoint has sold 115 shares. They go to Lumi. They say everything's gone great. They execute the green shoe. Now there's extra 15 shares trading. Everybody's happy. IPO is doing great reputation for.
And to be clear, in that case, Morgan Stanley or whomever the investment bank is, they then don't lose by being caught short those 15 shares. So they're not penalized because the deal went well.
Exactly. Now, the funny thing is that on the flip side, if for whatever reason the share price drops, so now they went out at 480 and now it's dropped to, call it 380, they then need to be a buyer of those 15 shares because then they're only going to do the IPO and have sold 100 shares. They then need to go into the market and to buy those shares back. So the bank actually does make money. And you might say to yourself, well, isn't this incentive for the bank to try to tank the IPO? And the answer is no. And we saw this again with Facebook, and then we see this now with PurePoint. You make so much in money in fees by doing an IPO that banks want that recurring revenue. It is a terrible reputational thing to happen. Like what happened to Morgan Stanley post the Facebook IPO was disastrous. They basically took public Facebook, and then all the companies that were coming on the heels, again, this was in 2012, all the tech companies that were coming on the heels, they then went and they didn't use Morgan Stanley for a few years as their lead left underwriter. They went to more like Goldman Sachs and like other. So the same thing with PurePoint, they have this pipeline of all these companies behind them. So they don't want to have a failed IPO. It is terrible from a reputation standpoint. So even though they'll make some money, you like your expression of like, they're picking up pennies in front of a steamroller and then, they're losing their business. So that's, again, a terrible decision. So it is not because they're trying to do that. But what we see Rishi saying is that he is a buyer. So he is trying to help, again, put that upward pressure on the stock price. So that's why he's saying he's a buyer only. He's trying to support the stock and, again, put that upward pressure on the share price. But to your point, I don't understand why he would say he's not going to also,
If you're a trader, if you're a trader, you don't say I'm a buyer only.
Yeah. So
because then your clients say, great, here's where would you bid my stock? Like
100%.
It just doesn't make any sense. It's a little bit confusing.
100%. But so as we can see, chaos, they're down one man with Kenny gone. It's crazy. And next thing we see Yaz, she sees her phone ring. She picks it up and it's Otto Moston. Remember, he says, last night's invitation still stands. A drink later after my lunch at the club. So he wants to somehow introduce Yaz to this British electric guy, where I'm still confused as to what the purpose of that was, unless I think he might have orchestrated this whole thing, but that's a whole nother,
Oh, interesting. Yeah. The planting of the seed here with Otto Moston from episode 1 through to midway through this episode, I had a really hard time following that plot line. This is, I guess, white British dude face blindness. I was like, which one's Otto? Can't tell who's who. He was too similar to the other actor. after. I got a little bit confused.
Because of something Eric says later is why it made me think that this was all orchestrated and sort of like he was planting the seeds so that Yaz thinks she's doing something, but it's really. So that's my thought. But anyway, so Yaz is sort of like, why are you calling? And he says, bad days tend to be good days for me. And he says he just wants a sell-side view on Lumi.
And he runs a newspaper, right?
No. So there's the two guys. Okay, so just to recap.
So Lord Norton runs the newspaper and Otto Moston runs asset management firm?
I think so. So just to recap. So last episode, we were introduced to these two British white men, older men.
Whom I still can't apparently tell apart.
One of whom is this guy, Lord Norton, who is Henry's uncle. And he is the one who owns all of the newspapers and the gossip columns that are basically going after Yaz.
Got it.
The second guy is Otto Moston, who is Henry's godfather. Now, I'm not entirely sure I don't think we know necessarily what he does yet. To your point, I assume now he probably runs some kind of asset management firm. Although when Eric overhears this, he asks Yaz, who is this? And Yaz says, Otto Moston. So Eric is just like, yeah, but what portfolio manager? And she just repeats, Otto Moston. And then Eric is like, hang up. He says, you don't want to get involved. The only reason that he calls junior salespeople is to take a turn out of them, which I'm not exactly sure what that means.
Well, no. So what he's talking about here and what we're seeing with Venetia and what we're seeing with Yasmin is what I call battlefield promotions in the sales force, right? So Eric has shot Kenny. Kenny's gone. And so what's happening is now the junior salespeople are having to pick up all the phone lines, deal with this chaos in the middle of this whole thing, and it's an utter catastrophe. And when junior people pick up the phone for very, very senior portfolio managers, there's a very tried and true history of things going wrong. Of that portfolio manager being like, hey, what's going on with Lumi? And the junior salesperson not knowing how to tell the story like Eric would, being like, it's a total catastrophe. Everyone's asking for our bid. The thing's collapsing, right? So that's what Eric is saying. That he's
it goes back to your story with your kids. Yeah, it goes back to the story with your kids. Like, how did you do that magic trick? Oh, let me tell you how I did the magic trick.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's what Eric means by just wanting to take a turn out of you. And we see, by the way, Rishi, who is not having a good morning, being long massive amounts of this stock, although also theoretically short given the green shoe, but he's long. And we're hearing him confront Eric about the fact that he is now short-staffed. And what he says is he's like, there's a second-year analyst having to pick up Kenny's line. Do you really think it was a smart idea to fire Kenny on the morning of this IPO? The market is deciding in real time that this thing is a dog with fleas as the share price is going down. And dog with fleas, by the way, like that's very tradery term. So like A+ for getting the lingo right. And Venetia's like, Eric, what do you want me to say to Kenny's clients? And he just keeps telling her to hammer home the story. It's a buy on any weakness, end of conversation. But he doesn't look like he has the situation under control. And let's also remember, by the way, that about 5 minutes ago, his children were on the trading floor. And he and Yasmin are still hungover from their wild cocaine binge the night before. Like we have kept going from episode 1 into this day of chaos. So he's not necessarily thinking clearly. Yasmin looks like she's about to vomit and it's utter chaos. By the way, Robert is also still reeling from the death of Nicole, which we discovered. So like, let's get back into everyone's mindset here. No one is doing their job well. But Rishi is acting totally frantic, and Rishi wasn't part of this whole debacle. So it's a little bit interesting to see his behavior. He's scratching at his back like he has like some kind of rash. And he says, I'm about to breach my risk limit. I can't buy any more Lumi stock to support it. And Anraj, who's his junior trader, who we're starting to see more of this season, asked him if he's still running his sterling position. And he says, what happens when the Bank of England hikes rates this morning? Rishi tells him to shut up and freaks out at him. But I'm like, what is going on here? Why is Rishi freaking out? What is his sterling position? We're all of a sudden thrown into this new plot line with Rishi that's developing that isn't fully fleshed out. But with risk limits, just to touch on this, when you're a market maker, remember, you're not proprietary trading. But you're
not supposed to be.
You're right, exactly. But like you will have positions and things as a function of your market making that you can decide to hold on the books or hedge alternatively, right? But there are limits around those things to protect the bank from you just going out and being like, you know what, screw you guys. A client put us into this position. Doesn't matter how I got into it, but I have this view and I'm just going to take it to the max and hold it and whatever. There's these risk limits put in place to prevent that from happening. So even when the bank is tasked with something like running this IPO and trying to support the stock price, there's going to be some fixed number and there's going to be controllers throughout the bank who are watching Ricci's book and seeing what his position is in this stock. And so we know that he's up against it. We know that he's at the limit of what he can do. And the market is taking him down. So he's losing money.
Yep. To your point, he also, because clearly when Anraj asked about the sterling position, he's not forthcoming about it. So that's why I was saying he's not supposed to be taking these positions, but like he probably has something that Anraj knows about that like nobody else does. And so again, is this his own proprietary position? Like we don't know. So meanwhile,
so you think Rishi's doing something illegal?
Well, I think somehow he has this secret position because why wouldn't he just be like, you know, I had XYZ client, you know, it just, that doesn't make sense, the secrecy. So then meanwhile, Sweet Pea starts to talk to Yaz about this strange date that her friend who's an influencer went on with Henry Muck. And I guess in The Guardian, they're spilling the tea on some of his like, I don't know, sexual predilections, if you will. So, and Yaz just goes, why are you telling me this?
And like right now, too, of all times, like it's utter chaos on the trading floor. And I felt the same way. And I mean, it's funny because Sweet Pea is constantly towing the line of inappropriateness, but like it works for her.
Yeah. But Yaz is like, what the heck? The phone rings again. Eric asks Yaz if she's going to get it. Yaz falls down. Like she's clearly
it's Anna Gearing calling. It's
right.
Anna Gearing, the head of Future Dawn, the ESG focused hedge fund where Harper works.
Yep.
She stands up and faints. And we hear Rishi in the off-camera dialogue say, I told you those heels were too high. Going back to all of the conversations, by the way, we've had about heel height and scandalousness. So you had mentioned on our other podcast, by the way, that you were disappointed that industry didn't get an Emmy nomination. Truly I think, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the off-camera dialogue and the things that are not said in industry deserve the Emmy nomination. The actual things that are said, whatever, but the off-camera dialogue and the like unsaid things, that's what they deserve.
We still need to do that post that goes into like a bunch of the off-camera dialogue because we wanted to do that at some point. Anyway, so Eric did say to Yaz when she fell down, he said, this constant state of emergency, this is as good as it gets. You want to know what's worse than a ringing phone? Silence. So we're going to get the stock price to close above 480. If you can't handle it, show yourself out the door. So that's when, again, we find out that it's definitely Anna Gearing. Venetia says, you know, feel like I'm doing two jobs. And Eric is just like, your tone's inappropriate with me, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So Yaz picks up the phone and Anna obviously is not happy. She's like, did you guys sell the fundamental story? Do people know something I don't? My reputation's on the line here. Did you oversell the
fundamental story?
Oh, okay. Issue with my notes. But she says, did Pierpoint overprice Lumi? All this stuff. And Yaz just says, this is just panic. You don't want to be trigger happy. But Anna was like, it better turn. So we can
see now on the screen that it's trading below 400. Remember, the goal was for it to be trading at 480 by the end of the day. So we have gone from, I think it was 430 where this thing allegedly priced to now sub 400. So it's almost down 10%.
Yeah. All right. So now the next scene, we're back with Henry at the London Stock Exchange, and he's obviously very focused on the price. And there was this kind of funny little exchange with Robert where he goes, we started at 430. We're now down to 4. What percentage decrease is that? And Robert takes out his calculator. Henry goes, do it in your head, fuckface. What did you study at Oxford? And Robert goes, geography. Henry's just like, why? Sorry.
Mark just goes, why? Just like the utter despair in his voice is so cute. But also, like, this is the kind of sales and trading thing where I've always joked about how my interview question was, what's 3% of 60 to see how comfortable I was doing that. Like, this is exactly Robert. And my frustration with, I'm about to unload on Robert this episode. Robert sucks. There is this interchange between Muck and Robert that really starts to bother me. Muck is like, listen, every tick down is potentially tens of millions. And Robert's like, what, off your net worth? Like, he's so indignant about the idea that Muck should be profiting off this IPO. Stop, Robert. You're literally running an IPO for an investment bank. Okay.
Yeah,
you guys are
I
getting
agree.
paid a fee to do this. To be angry at the CEO of the company for having a vested interest in seeing the stock do well is so antithetical to the whole thing of the business. And Muck, by the way, is like, listen, it's not tens of millions of dollars off my net worth that I'm so concerned about, even if that truly is his motivation.
Yeah.
But he says, like, it's off the valuation of the company, thereby its public perception and its ability to do
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
So we have this central tension that's developing between Robert and Muck, where Robert just thinks and is acting like Henry Muck is out for this like get rich quick scheme. And I think what we're starting to see with Muck's character is that he is kind of like a true believer, even if he is an incompetent one, but he wants to do good, but also wants to get rich. He's not a perfect person by any stretch of the imagination, but like, I don't think he's looting this company for personal gain. I think he's just kind of a tech bro who like doesn't understand all the nuances of actually being a CEO. He's like, I have a vision. I'm going to make $1 billion and it's going to be great because this is what rich people do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's like, is there the actual science behind it? It sort of goes back to like Elizabeth Holmes, where it's like she was a believer, but then she did some stuff that's sketchy. Is the science there? Is the science not there? We don't know the mechanics of what the heck they're selling. But still, I'm with you. I think he wants the business to do well. I do think he wants to monetize it and profit from it. But he also comes from a very like this to him, winning, in my opinion, is not like pulling money out of this business.
And proving that he's not just born with a silver spoon in his mouth and he's an idiot, right? He wants to actually make something of himself. So I immediately was so put off by Robert here, and it just gets worse for me with Robert as this episode goes on.
I do agree with that. So anyway, as he's talking to Robert, somebody comes in and says that there's someone from the Telegraph, and Henry is just like, tell him to fuck off. How did he get my number? Blah, blah, blah. And then he goes to his assistant, Katie, and says, you're not panicking? Katie, tell me it'll all be fine. And she just looks at him weird and walks away. And as he's thinking about it, he says, oh, wait a second. Like, actually, maybe I do want to talk to the press. And Robert looks at him and says, I know it's not my job to tell you this, but you should not be speaking to the press right now.
But that is his job to tell him that. Like,
yes,
do your job, Robert.
He says, anything you say so close to the launch could be considered offering language, and we might get shit with the regulator. Plus, the market might misread you. So Henry then says, what is
that true, by the way, on the offering language thing? I don't
know. But, and by the way, there could be different rules in like the UK versus the US. But I mean, it's definitely possible. You know, there is a law that all in the US, at least, that all investors have to get messaging at the same time. And this goes back to the Facebook IPO. One of the things that they did get in trouble for was having conversations with some of the institutional investors and not retail investors about, I think it was like weakness with the mobile app or something. And so then there was actually a whole lot of trouble that Facebook got in post that IPO, again, sort of with all the drama. So I do think there is potentially some issue, again, if you go to this one publication, but it's probably not great. So anyway, as he is talking about potentially talk to the press, you see him start to lose it because he says to Robert about his assistant, who he clearly has been working with forever. He goes, what's her fucking name? And Robert's like, you know her name. You just used it. It's Katie. And then he snaps out of this weird trance that he was in and yells to Katie, patch the telly through and get Market Watch and our other pals. He says, none of the Norton papers, again, that's his uncle. We don't want it to look like a conflict of interest. Thank you, Katie. And then he's like, it's time for some smart triage. Let's get a war room in the office. And Katie just goes, like a meeting room? He goes, yeah, like a meeting room. So I thought that was funny. So.
It's just interesting. Muck is vacillating between this like childlike state where he's like going to his assistant being like, are you panicking? Are you not panicking? Like, are you okay? Like, tell me everything's going to be okay. And trying to remember his role as the ESG CEO who cares so much about his employees. Like, how are you? Right. And then you realize that it's all a facade. Right. And he doesn't even believe any of this stuff himself. And he's like, what's her fucking name? Like, I don't remember who she is. Like, he seems torn between these two sides of his personality. And I think that split is going to be ultimately key to the person who solves the issues for him, why she's able to step in and have so much influence.
Yeah. So the next scene, we're at Future Dawn with Harper and Petra. And this whole exchange I thought was really interesting. So it basically opens, Harper sitting across from Petra in her office. And so Petra says to her, I've been wrestling with my expectations of you, the lived reality of this particular new hire sitting in front of me. There's dissonance. Harper asks, how so? She says, well, your former boss called 9 times. We never did take his call. His email follow-ups were always these brusque imperatives like H. Stern, not a smart hire. 9 times. telling us not to hire you. If it was incompetence, I'd expect once or not at all. If you were problematic, maybe 3. But the fact that he called 9 times gives me pause. So either he really can't stand you or he doesn't want anyone else to have you. Which is it? And Harper said he doesn't like people who go against the grain. And then the camera flashes to Anna yelling fuck, because we know again, like her investment is not doing well, not doing so great. Petra says, well, Anna seemed to want you. And the calls compounded. I began to think to myself, this Harper Stern must be a pretty unique individual. She sits closer and then says more softly, look, I want to hedge our exposure on the Lumi IPO. And so Harper then asks if Anna knows about this. And Petra says, no. So I'm sick of losing money and you've been behind enemy lines. So who do I call? And so then she asks what qualities you want a salesperson. Petra says naivete and amenable. And immediately who does Harper think of? Yaz, right? Yaz Hanani. So that's setting the stage for what's going to come. But I did like that color we got about the vetting process for when.
Petra is starting to emerge as everything I think Harper wishes she was. Someone who takes all the information she's given, figures out how to use it to her advantage, but without that totally sinister, unethical bent that Harper has, where like nothing is sacred. And I think it's also interesting that she's American, that she's not British. That was an interesting casting choice. And I don't know if this is going to come up in future or whatever, but like, so she and Harper are both the Americans within this firm that we know came from Germany, but is now in London or whatever. She's got an American accent. I don't know if she just is, a very talented British person who has decided to mask her accent or whatever it is. But anyways, regardless, I loved this insight that she draws from this data. And it shows how Petra's mind works. It shows like you give me enough data points and I'm going to look for a pattern that isn't immediately evident. We know that she is not a true believer in ESG based on her conversation with Harper in the last episode. And we know that she's starting to be disenchanted with Anna, who is throwing a tantrum like a toddler in the next room over about the price of Lumi stock intraday. So I actually really, really like Petra. She's starting to really grow on me fast.
I agree. So the next scene, we are now in this war room where we have Jon Snow, and I have to keep calling him that. Sorry, Henry Muck, Katie, and Robert there, and they're on a Zoom call with the reporters. So he says, next up, we've got John O'Brien from the Financial Times, which is obviously legit. And so as they're starting to gear up to talk, Robert is just like, what are you doing? We should get your PR people on the line. You should have printed remarks. What are we doing? Again, Henry thinking he knows best how to fix things. Just why hide behind the inhumanity of a press release? And Robert's like, well, because there's less chance for it to get misconstrued. So
and as someone who grew up around newspapers, by the way, I'm thinking to myself, shouldn't he know better? Of all of the people to be totally naive about interactions with the press, this seems like a very unlikely candidate.
Yes. So as the conversation starts, the reporter says, what do you make of the growing rumors that the smart money is leaving Lumi? And so the reporter says, got a tip that asks Ashford.
Sorry. So he says smart money is leaving Lumi. He says Fidelity and Millennium. Now, Fidelity and Millennium play very differently in IPOs. So Fidelity is real money, okay? Point. Fidelity is going into the hands of retirement accounts, into buy and hold accounts, et cetera, et cetera. Millennium is a hedge fund. So while they may have long-term holding strategies, a Millennium is not actually likely to get preferential allocation in something with scarcity because they are much more inclined to turn around and flip this thing for a quick profit. Yes. So to lump them in together and just come up with some big names is actually very unrealistic. If it was hedge funds are dumping the stock after it's down 10%, it's cool. Duh. Yeah. But why did you give them an allocation in the first place? That's on you. Such a great point. Versus Fidelity. And so the Financial Times reporter should know better and the writers should know better than to lump them into the same boat. But if Fidelity is openly dumping the stock, that is a huge deal because this is supposed to be strong hands. Their holding cycle is so much longer. Versus Millennium, they're going to have tight risk limits. So if you're down immediately out of the gate, you might get a tap on the shoulder on this thing. Yeah. So as someone who covered these hedge funds, not for IPOs, but for new issues of, say, super soft debt or things like that, fighting for them to get allocations in any kind of new issue was, forget it. It was a bloody battle that resulted in maybe if you were lucky, the tiniest little allocation. It was very, very hard to get anything new issue.
100%. So Henry then says, we don't leave sleep over the whims of institutional investors. This is a democratic company. I care about our customers and affordable energy. I respect the man on the street, not the man in the office. And Robert just is sitting there scrambling, like, hang up the phone, terminate the fucking call. And the reporter is like, I like that. That's nice. And then Henry adds, in fact, we might offer some stock to our customers via the Lumi app. And the reporter then asks, like that disastrous Deliveroo policy. And so I don't know if this was real. I should have looked this up, and you probably
I should have looked it up too. It's funny. I figured you would, and I got lazy. Deliveroo IPO. So Deliveroo was like a British DoorDash that had a super hyped IPO, and it was apparently the worst IPO in history. Shares closed 26% below the offering price, I think the day of the IPO.
Yeah, so that's not great. So the reporter says, like, that disastrous Deliveroo policy, because they probably gave their customers shares of stock in their company as part of the offering. So then Henry goes, we never execute that badly. Anyways, I was joking. The point is, I can't see how more shares for retail investors.
Well, by the way, when he says, oh, we'd never do that, just kidding. Like, I don't know that he actually was joking. I think he's like, oh, okay, I guess that's about it.
Well, I think he was like trying to think up good ideas to try to make it look like he's this man of the people on the fly in this like conversation with the FT. They know what happened with this other company that did something similar. So he's just like, oh yeah, haha, sorry, just kidding. And one other just quick point back to the Facebook IPO. So a lot of times if you're a retail investor, so that's the yous, the me's, like the people, I mean, technically a retail investor.
People who don't get allocations.
People who don't get allocations, exactly. It's usually people who have, call it, less than, I think it's like $1 million of investable net worth is the technical definition of retail. But we tend to think of it as just, again, you have the institutional players and then the individuals like the retail players. So the point is with Facebook, there was that they actually did give a significant amount of allocation to retail investors. And so that also sort of was part of the problem because, as I mentioned, like that's actually oftentimes almost seen as a bad sign that there's not enough institutional investors.
There should be so much institutional demand.
Yeah. So that was, again, it's a sign if you're giving too many retail that there's not enough institutions that want to buy into the IPO. So that's actually a very bad sign. So then Henry says, I can't see how more shares for retail is a bad thing. And it's like, he's like, okay. The reporter then says, great, I think I've got everything I want. Cheers. And then the call ends and it's just like, oh God. So any other words, Jen, on that disastrous
No, I mean, it's very clear once that phone call is over that Muck is in a total state of shock and is on the verge of committing career suicide here.
Yeah. 100%. All right. So now we're back at Pierpoint and we're back on the trading floor. And Rishi is panicking and he just keeps saying, he's like, I can't support Lumi without breaching my risk limits. And so we have all these people who want bids. It's chaos. And next thing we see is Adler walks on the floor. And so he comes in and he says,
let me paint the scene.
Oh, yeah.
This is like the hero moment. It's like the seas part and in struts Adler with his sleeves rolled up to the elbow like he's a good old boy on the trading floor. And he's like, he's got the vest on. He totally looks the part. He's got some lackey who comes in front of him to start like setting up a desk or whatever.
Yep.
And he tells Rishi, hey, I took care of your risk limit. He then hops on the phone, picks up like the first call that comes in, spews out some sales spiel about how it's so great, and on the fly gets an order from a client and asks Rishi to make him an offer. It is like the sexiest moment. And like as someone like this is trading
married to a trader
right here. Oh my God. Like Bill Adler, where have you been all my life? Like he's coming in being all the things that Eric and his team are not. Yeah. And he's making it look easy. So it's just, he is the magician, right? He is David Copperfield coming in and has the clients eating out of his hand because he's telling the right story and he's exuding confidence and he sounds like he believes it, right? Yeah. It's George Costanza. It's not a lie if you believe it's true.
Right. Well, and then he comes over the hoot and he says to everyone, he says, good morning. Can I suggest a bit of poise? Thank you. And then the next thing that happens is Rishi then comes over the hoot and says, okay, on the tape, Bank of England is going to leave rates where they are. And so on the screen, it says, BOE keeps rates at 4.5%. Despite expectations to hike, this is positive for UK equities and for Lumi. So everyone is just like praise the Lord. You see the share price start to tick up. It goes from 401 to 406. Like, again, things are starting to look good.
And by the way, just a quick note on this. This is more like a rising tide floats all boats. Rates being unchanged, just naturally, right? If the market was pricing in that they were going to hike, should lift equity prices because it's more accommodative monetary policy.
Yeah.
But I didn't think of, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there was any like specific rate sensitivity that Lumi had other than like just, hey, equities are up, therefore Lumi is going to do better. It's not like they were about to price a bond deal or something like that. Like, but there could be additional reasons.
No, it's literally just the market was freaking out. Now all of a sudden there's good news. And so you see the share price start to recover until Yaz says, oh my fucking God, have you seen these tweets? John O'Brien over at the FT says Lumi CEO confirms smart money exits energy firm. And then you see the share price start dropping. But it was just like,
down to
it went from,
by the time she's done with the sentence.
It was like Adler had come in to save the day. Everything was turning. And then again, obviously you have Henry who just completely effed it up. But anyway, so next scene, we're back with Robert and Henry. And this whole scene, it goes back to what we spoke about, I think at last episode, where you said, you know, it reminds you of almost like that WeWork space, right?
Yes.
They have a playground. It literally
playground.
is and they have children's toys. There's like this giant flower that is like a squeaky toy, and there's a ball pit. And I'm just like, what is this? You have Henry and Robert who are sitting there having this conversation. Henry's looking obsessively at his phone. He's getting texts. It's his uncle, Lord Norton, who says, I'm proud of you. Market is just chatter. And then a bunch of like super freaked out messages, some of them making fun of him with like a poop emoji. But anyway, so Robert turns to Henry and says, turn off your phone. We're trading less than half a day, and the US is going to come in soon, right? The US market, because they're obviously 5 hours behind, 6 hours. How about, So they would come in with more potential buyers, which means more appetite, more flow. And Henry is just like, you don't understand this fact. The price is the confidence in me and the confidence in the company. And so Robert just is like, you should have listened to us and not gone to the press. And so they start to go on. And this goes back to what you had said about Henry versus Robert. Robert seeing him as this, again, like money hungry villain who actually, he does have a really great quote. So I'm going to read some of this stuff. So Robert says, is this all above board? And Henry said, of course it's above board. I'm not a crook. We're all at the mercy of external factors and at the mercy of the market. To make this last 10 years a success, to capitalize on it for something real, I've had to enter into this crapshoot, this fucking casino, talking about the markets. He kicks the playground right before screaming, it's not my fault. Our clueless society has decided we raise capital this way. He then leans down and says, 642 people work for me and rely on this business for their livelihoods. 2 million households. And Robert then adds, those are homes that are going to go cold, right? Once Lumi gets those installation contracts on the prepayment meters. I mean, do you care? And so Henry is like, what the hell are you talking about? Robert says, you forget that I've been in all of your meetings. I've sat through your evangelisms and your soapboxing, and I've heard you parrot this literature. It opens people's wallets, doesn't it? Reminds me of Adam Newman, you know, the evangelizing and everything.
Yeah.
And Henry says, it's called selling a vision, you moron. That's bringing people with you. Robert says, it's built on nothing. Henry says everything's built on nothing. That's how you build something. You talk it into becoming. And Robert says that's fucking right. It's messianic. You fake it till you make it. Well, let me ask you a more direct question. If you believe in it so much, then why is your lockup so short? So this is the first time when I'm like, okay, he has a real point here.
Correct. So we're getting insight into this tension that we didn't have before. I wish we'd had more of this back and forth, because the way that Robert has been treating Muck throughout this whole first episode and a half seems totally unwarranted and seems inconsistent with, yes, Muck is clearly flawed, but it seems Robert lacks a fundamental understanding of how businesses work almost in his reaction to him. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. So I do want to just quickly touch on the 60-day thing. So this is interesting. This is the first time when it's like, when Robert says, why is your lockup so short? So usually what happens in an IPO, and we've talked about this before in the concept of the primary and secondary proceeds, where it's like you raise money. Again, the money that comes in, some could go to the company, some could go to, again, investors cashing out. But remember, you're only taking a small percentage of the equity public. So it could be like 10 to 20%. So if the company is valued, I'm making this up, right? If the company's valued, I'm going to use the Facebook example, at $100 billion, you're only taking, call it 10 billion public. And again, some of that cash that comes in is going to literally go to the company to shore up their capital reserves, to pay down debt, what have you. Some will go to actual investors. And so the people, though, who don't get to sell out, which 90% or more, it could be 100% if all of the cash is primary proceeds, those people, they can't just sell right away because you don't want every single investor running for the exit. So typically what happens is there is this lockup period where it's usually standard terms is 180 days that if you are an existing investor, you have to wait, right? Half a year, basically 6 months before you can start to sell your shares. And at that point, usually what happens too is that you're not going to like have everyone running for the exits. You'll usually have an orderly secondary offering. And so again, you get the bank back involved, they find their investors and like it's a much more orderly process. So the fact that, and again, I forget if it's just Henry or if it's for everybody. It might be like it's a special thing for him that it's 60 days.
I don't think we know.
Yeah, we don't know. It's still
but
weird.
Your implies at the very least Henry, and also probably like the senior executives, like the big stakeholders, right?
Yeah. And so Robert says it's almost unheard of. It's the lowest it could be when you can start selling your shares ASAP after the listing. And Henry says, so I'm not allowed to be motivated by my personal remuneration and by reforming the industry for the better. And he says, you see, this is the problem with how so many people see the world. Two things can be true at once. Maybe you will realize that when you grow up. And Robert says, I've never met anyone with a bigger blind spot. And so anyway, they continue to go on. And Henry says, this is ironic. You're the parasite's parasite because he's an investment banker. Who's the loser here? And then Robert screams, and this is where I liked this. He said, you're just an overqualified, underdeveloped, parentally backstopped child. Your wins are yours. And your losses, well, that's somebody else's problem. Your life is one fucking long MBA course. And actually, that was what I did love because I do think it speaks to this idea that, again, we sort of do see it with a lot of like tech people. And if companies do well, it's capitalism on the way up and it's socialism on the way down as companies get bailed out. So I did like that from that perspective.
I think, in terms of the insight into the different types of characters that we have in the show, we've got the Yasmins and the Mucks, and we've got the Roberts and the Harpers.
Yeah.
And I listened to a podcast interview on Not Skinny But Not Fat with Allison Williams, whom I like very much. Yeah.
Allison Williams, if you don't know who she is, she was one of the main character in Girls, and her dad it's Brian Williams, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's like a news anchor.
Yeah, exactly. And she addressed the fact that she's a Nepo baby in Hollywood, which these days it feels like everybody's a Nepo baby in Hollywood. I feel like there's no actor or actress out there right now who isn't in some way related to the industry. And so what she says is, listen, yes, it's one thing to have like the doors open and things like that. But she said, what you really have is just simply a higher floor, right? Mm-hmm. All of these other actors and actresses out there. Remember, we heard Kevin Costner speak about literally sleeping in his car outside the movie studio set, hoping for a job and things like that. Where Allison Williams, if she took a flyer on being an actress and it didn't work out, she could fall back on her Yale education. She could fall back on the fact that her parents were going to be able to provide for her monetarily and like let her pursue other things in life, right? She didn't have to leverage her family up to the hilt and risk them being out on the streets to pursue this dream. And that's what Muck has. He can take this big, lofty shot at this big tech dream, this ESG thing, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, he's parentally backstopped. He comes from money. And eventually he says to Robert, okay, well, thanks for all the fancy words. Why don't you just call me a posh cunt and get it over with, right? Because that is really what Robert is saying and resenting, right? It is this class differential between the person in the service role at the investment bank who's scrapping and trying so hard to make this work so that he can get paid and work on upward social mobility versus Henry, who at the whims of someone who is effectively like a toddler, and I think it's very apt that they're having this conversation in this children's playroom, he can't control himself. He can't control the impulse to go talk to the press when he wants to talk to the press, right? He is behaving like a child and one who is parentally backstopped. And just like a child, when they throw a tantrum, it's everybody else's problem.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and then to round the scene off, Robert and Henry get into a physical fight in this ball pit. I mean, it goes back to them as children. And then like a little girl runs in and I'm not really sure what the purpose
Well, I think it also clarifies. I was unsure, to your point about WeWork, I was unsure whether or not this was actually a room for like adult employees to relax in. And then when the little girl runs in, it becomes clear that this is like an in-house daycare type thing that they have for employees with children. Because one of the things that obviously a very socially evolved company would do would be to have spaces in it where like working moms and dads could have their children come play at the office while they work,
I actually would have liked it better if they didn't do that and just made it that like they had to get this like child's playground.
They filmed the scene. The way they filmed it was good because they filmed it kind of like through the archways where you could only see part of the fight at different periods to give the perspective of the totally perplexed employees who are watching this go down
watching.
and see this absolute absurdity of the two of them literally beating each other up with squeaky toys. I could have done without this entire absurdity, to be honest. It's just too much. It's too heavy-handed. I just wish it had been more subtle.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are back. Actually, sorry, I should say, as Robert is leaving the Lumi office, he does get a call from Venetia. Because remember, they're dating. He snuck out of the freaking bedroom.
She gave him a necklace as a gesture of like their commitment to one another.
Yes,
but he left at Nicole's.
Yeah. But she is blaming herself, thinking, oh my God, I shouldn't have given you this necklace. And she apologizes to him for it. And he's like, no, because he is being distant because he literally went to his lover's house and she freaking dropped dead next to him. So he's freaked out about that. Now, why he did that in the first place, who knows? But now he realizes, okay, I have to go get this necklace from Nicole's house.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're back at Future Dawn with Harper and Petra. And Petra comes up to Harper, who is getting coffee, and she asks her for 3 ideas to hedge Lumi's exposure. So Harper comes back with 3 ideas. The first, she says, is natural gas futures, as the biggest risk to Lumi is rising gas prices. Again, we spoke about that in the last episode, how like I don't really understand how that would be a risk to them. It would seem like it would be more a benefit, but obviously we don't understand how this particular company makes money. So, okay, fine. Number 2, she says, is buy credit default swaps on a basket of oil and natural gas stocks. So credit default swaps are almost like insurance policies that pay out if companies go bankrupt. So you would make money if these potential stocks start to get in trouble, if, the credit spreads start to widen. And so she says the government will have to cap consumer prices, leaving the majors, right, the major oil and natural gas companies on the hook. The market is already starting to sense this shift. And then the third, long-term, short the pound, government bailout risk, taxpayers will have to subsidize Lumi. Like, what? Like, Lumi is now this structurally massive.
Lumi's the new Lehman? Like, no, that was so absurd.
This is a tech company going public. I mean, how is the government getting involved? Like, that makes no sense, but whatever. Okay, it is what it is. And as she's going through these 3 things, there's this one little interlude where you see Anna, who was watching Harper and Petra and starting to be like, what's going on here? And so then you see as they're talking, Petra, it starts to be like, oh, I take my coffee with 3 sugars, to make it seem like, hey, we're talking about something totally benign.
And that Harper's just the assistant, that she's not actually participating in any trade ideas here.
Right.
She's just talking to her about her coffee order.
Yep. So then I think Anna, it's unclear if she believes that this is all that they're talking about. So she's like, I'll have one if you're making one. And then they finish up their conversation. But as Harper starts to give those longer term ideas, Petra says she doesn't want to trade for the future. She wants to trade for today. Like, I want to make money now. So
not this like wild short sterling for the 10 years hence when Lumi is so structurally critical to the British economy that there's a bailout.
Right. So Petra then says, okay, let's go put Anna's money where your mouth is. Petra walks into her office. Harper follows her. Petra says all of these trades are already in the green. Like, they're already starting to make money. And so she thinks that she's missed the move. And Harper says, no, you haven't. Call Yasmin and ask for a price on CDS. So then you flash over to Pierpoint again, where things are crazy. And Yas picks up the phone and realizes it's Anna, but it's not. It's Petra, who basically asks her to price CDS on listed oil and natural gas for $5 million. So it's a small trade. Petra then mutes her phone. And as she does that, Harper adds the color that Rishi is going to be too busy because he's dealing with obviously all of this Lumi nonsense. So they're going to use Anraj, who's more junior. So exactly what Harper says does happen. Yaz asks Rishi passes it to Anraj, and it shows that Harper basically knows what's going on. Like, she sort of has the inside track. So Anraj quotes 175. Eric is right there, and he's seeing what's happening with Yasmin. Like, he's getting, like, his spidey senses are going up. He's like, why would Future Dawn be asking for this trade? Like, this seems strange. So anyway, when Petra hears the 175, she's confused because she's looking at a Bloomberg screen and she sees 200. So she asks Harper, how are you doing this? Because they're getting this like super favorable pricing. And Harper says, say that it's yours, like execute the trade. Petra then says, this is great, nice upswing already. Harper says, do not pick up the phone line to Pierpoint for the next hour. And Petra says, noted. But again, clearly something is going on that she was able to get that super favorable pricing, but has sort of proven herself-ish that she has like this inside knowledge with Pierpoint. Everything she said would happen. And they've already started to make money. So
now put a mental pin in this to come back to, because we can talk about what's real here and what is not.
Yeah. So next scene now, Anna walks into Petra's office and asks why she got the trade confirmed, because obviously she didn't execute that. Petra tells her that she doesn't have authority over her trades, but Anna is pissed. And she basically grabs Petra's Bloomberg and she's like, this is a betrayal of your
grabs her keyboard and literally unplugs it.
Yes. So she grabs the stupid Bloomberg and she's like, this is a betrayal of our friendship. And Harper then tries to get up and Anna's just like, you sit down. So she talks to Petra. She's like, you drove me to the hospital when I was having my child. You're the godmother to Bodicea, which I thought was like is that an actual name? Like it sounds
That's
like
her child's name.
Petra says to her, you asked me to be her godmother. What was I going to say? No, you employ me. What was I going to do? How many other godparents are there? And then Anna's like, well, there's 4, but that's not the point. I always thought of us as equals. And Petra's like, no, you've made it clear that we're not, but you're the one who pushed for this friendship. And Anna's sitting there like, well, just be a fucking person. And Petra's like, you mean be like you? So anyway, this whole thing is just like kind of insane.
It is a brilliant send up, and there's more to this. This entire episode is like a brilliantly written SNL skit, totally debunking the idea of this. You know, if you ever watched like Wonder Woman or whatever, the idea of this like female warrior society, the name Bodicea actually comes from like an ancient British tribal female warrior. So like, there's this mythology that Anna is playing into with the ESG driven fund, like the fund that's going to do good. And it's going to be all women. There's not a man in sight at this firm that we ever see on the floor. And it's going to be this place where everybody's emotionally intuitive and things like that. It's such a visceral takedown of that dream that like, I don't call anyone my employee. Like we all just work together and it's so democratic and blah, blah, blah. And Petra is showing that it's all bullshit, that Anna is utter bullshit. And everything that this whole thing is built on is just a mountain of lies. And it's
smoke and mirrors.
Anna is so unself-aware that she doesn't get the joke.
That's
right?
true.
She's behaving like a toddler. She's falling prey to the worst tropes of both male and female behavior. The throwing of the tantrum, the being emotional around the trading. Like that's what traders do when they like are throwing a tantrum or use phones, things like that. But the bottom line is we are seeing that all of the noble traits upon which both Anna and this ESG movement have built themselves are in fact utter lies, that there's no substance to it. And so I absolutely loved this scene, and I love Petra's reaction to Anna here.
Yep. Well, Anna says to Harper, she's like, I don't even know what to say to you. And Petra's like, your board is here. So she walks out. Anna's like, we're not finished here. And Petra walks out to get some air. At that point, Harper then goes and sits down at Petra's desk. She picks up the phone and she calls Eric. And when he answers, he's like, Pure Point, Eric Tao. And Harper's on the other line, doesn't say anything. And
just
so
breathing like a freaking serial killer. But by the way, Eric has a board. Like he would know it's Future Dawn calling.
I know.
It's not a mystery. So I think he knows it's her on the other end of the phone. And I think they're having this like moment. And I mean, it's truly like the serial killer being like, you know, like.
But it also was interesting because it's like clearly she still feels so betrayed and hurt, because you sort of think of Harper as someone who doesn't have any feelings. But like, I do think she felt so betrayed by Eric in a way that I haven't seen her have any feelings towards anyone really. And like, this is the only time you see almost any emotion about anything. So I thought that was interesting. All right. So now in the next scene, we're back at the Lumi offices with Katie, Henry, and the Lumi board. And so Henry is fresh off his fight with Robert. And as he's going, he, sees the board there. He goes, and he's like, do I have a suit jacket anywhere? And Katie tells him, no, there's no jacket because you implemented a no jacket policy. So he's basically wearing his stupid Lumi t-shirt from when he was like at the London Stock Exchange to ring the bell. So anyway, I think he picks up like a what's it called? The vest? I don't know what he had, but he picks up something. Anyway, he walks into the board meeting, clearly feeling ambushed. And the board asks outright, why the hell did you massage the number so late in the day? Because you remember in the last episode, they'd done some weird stuff with the debt profile and blah, blah, blah. And Henry says, we needed a better enterprise value to EBITDA multiple. more palatable valuation, pre-IPO, higher share price. Massaging your short-term and long-term liabilities is totally in line with normal banking practices. No, it's not. Actually, no. The board member then says, so why has your CFO just tendered his resignation? And Henry's asks, oh, he resigned? Has he? How noble. And they basically say that this CFO, he's not going to make it public that he's resigning now, but they go on and they're like, you're great at raising money. You are this evangelist, you're great at spinning, whatever. But the company's now at a different stage and it's outgrown your skill set. So how about you consider what's going to happen post IPO? Maybe you shouldn't be in charge anymore. And Henry just gets up. And this is back to him almost having a mental break. He's nothing's changed. He walks into the door and then he says, no, this is real. And then he just walks out and the board is just what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
It's just he's losing it.
No, he looks like he's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. It's saying none of this is real is a problem.
Yeah, a little bit. So back on the trading floor, now Sweet Pea tells everyone that there was reports that the board had gone into Lumi. And so Anraj is that has to be bearish. And Yaz is I think so. And so even Adler says that the reports are killing them. And he's the CEO has to be kept out of the story. Sweet Pea then turns to Yaz and says, he's quite dark, Henry, and goes on to tell him about this weird influencer, how he asked to pee on her in their second date, which is going to come back later. And again, this is not a sentence that I would have otherwise wanted to utter.
And by the way, the fact that Sweet Pea, again, thinks this is prime time to share this is wild. News.
Yeah.
So Yasmin is getting this understandably nauseating information from not to in Sweet Pea's words kink shame anyone, but she's gotten this information. Everything is going to shit. And Eric says to Yasmin, listen, you don't look well. Let me remind you, this is just people pushing buttons. Either we push buttons that benefit us or we coax people into pushing ones that benefit us. And you know what? People are buttons too. Mm-hmm. He then turns to Adler and asks him, what did Newman always say about markets? And Adler's just smoke and mirrors. And Eric says, that's right. This is all smoke and mirrors, but it's indivisible from reality. So we make reality. Yasmin gets this kind of dreamy look on her face. And Eric's what are you thinking about? What are you taking from this information? And she says, urine. And I think that Eric's what? But what's happening here is twofold. So we just had Muck say, none of this is real. We now have Eric saying that perception, smoke and mirrors, the magic trick is indivisible from reality. So none of it's real, but it's also reality. But what I think is happening for Yasmin here is she's internalizing this lesson that Eric and Adler are teaching her. And she's thinking, okay, if people are buttons too, I now have this information about Muck. I know that something needs to be done about this CEO. I've got all this information coming at me. He's been pulled into this meeting with the board. He's totally losing it. We don't know what's happening with him and Robert. And we've also now got this information about what he's into sexually. Okay. What can I, Yasmin, problem solver, do with all of this information? So something's clearly percolating and we have to figure out, okay, what magic trick, if you will, is Yasmin going to pull off to save the day here now that she's putting these pieces together?
Right. So Adler then says to Eric, why do we feel so understaffed? And Eric tells him that he let go of Kenny. And Adler is just shocked and looks at him and he's on the eve of an IPO? He's I meant you should let someone go over the next quarter. What kind of decision-making was that? Was that planned? And Eric just says, I made an executive decision. Adler was you made an irrational decision, and then says more loudly to everyone, why does the CEO keep making himself the story? We need to keep him out of the limelight. These rumors are killing us. And Eric says, Bill, you already said that. And Adler is oh, of course, it's important. You fucking hear me. And that actually, I didn't think anything of that in the first watch. Having seen the whole season, file that in the back of your mind that happened.
Got it. I just thought it was starting to show the cracks in Adler's facade that he was shaken.
Could be it too.
Eric made a very bad decision in letting Kenny go, right? He did it to appease Adler and follow his commands to make these big managerial decisions and show his teeth after being made partner in that first episode. But I think also I interpreted that as all of a sudden Adler is shaken by A, everything's going on, this day is not going well, but B, these are the consequences of me as a manager. And I thought maybe he was second guessing his own skill. And I just didn't know. But
that's a very good point. But
while that's happening off screen, we hear Yasmin now with her little solve calling Robert and saying she has an idea about something they can do to solve the Muck problem.
Yeah. So next scene, we're back with Robert, and he's at Nicole's house trying to go get this necklace that Venetia gave him. And so he climbs over this wall, so he's not going in the front door, and he goes to the house, and there's this random girl there. And he basically tells this girl that he needs to go, retrieve some sensitive document. Well, to him, it's random. He doesn't know who she is. So he tells...
stupid is Robert?
Well, yes. And the girl says, were you fucking mommy? And Robert's like, what are you talking about? And she said, you're a textbook target of hers. Did she shower you with gifts and fly you to Formentera? She says she does that with all of her favorites before saying, I'm joking.
By the way, in that little exchange, we get this insight into Nicole's daughter that she's cut from the exact same cloth as her mother is. She is putting down Robert, who is her dead mother's lover, the morning of her mother's death, to make him feel like he was less than her other love. Like, I mean, what a just telling one sentence to tell you everything you need to know about this family.
100%. And so Robert then says he had no idea she had a family, and the girl was like, neither did she. And so she goes on and says how she's so selfish. She says she was so Hello Magazine. Robert's like, what does that mean? She goes, she was a bit of Flash, a bit common. And Hello Magazine, is that still around?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Anyway, so the girl
it's
replies.
It's a British tabloid for our, like, it's like an OK magazine or like a People magazine for our American viewers.
Yep. So the girl replies, you fucking freak, you actually liked her. Anyway, Robert's there just trying to comfort her and is like, I'm so sorry for your loss. The girl tries to kiss him and he's just trying to comfort her like the way you would with like a child. And she does it again. And then as she goes to leave, she's like, I have to get back to some exam. And Robert asks if it's for the CFA. And she's like, no, I'm 15. So basically in this family, he has now made out with someone who was too old for him and now too young.
I could have done without this whole scene.
It was unnecessary. So Robert then calls Henry to apologize. And Henry sounds like he's having a breakdown. We know this. He says that he took medical psilocybin. And
before we get to that, do you wonder at all, though, if this scene was instructive in like Robert's change of heart with respect to Henry? Because, we've got Nicole's daughter, this daughter who had this posh upbringing and had all the parental subsidies, right? But no love, no nothing was, this toxicity was passed down to her. So I wonder if he's reframing a little bit his anger and resentment at Jon Snow for being a product of a similar environment, he assumes, right?
Yeah. I think
that was the purpose of this scene narratively. I just could have done without it.
I didn't think of that, but I agree that makes complete sense. And so anyway, as Henry is telling him that he locked himself in the disabled bathroom and is having a mental breakdown, took 3-day dose of medical psilocybin.
Which is, by the way, another tech bro trope. Like all the tech bros like love the mushrooms and stuff like that. I mean, maybe we should start trying them. Maybe
oh God, no. But so Robert then is like, holy shit. He's like, I'm coming to get you. So he calls Yaz to fill her in and says the market thinks that he's being replaced, so they need to make him visible. And so Yaz says they need to figure out some way to get Henry
She's got a
across
ski.
London. She is a ski. Yes.
So she needs to now leave to go to Lumi to meet up with Robert and Muck. But before she leaves, she gives this complex set of cryptic instructions to the other guys on the desk.
Right.
I'd love it if you could explain this because I actually don't understand how this helped move her plot along.
Yaz goes over to Anraj, tells him to call the Gentlemen's Club, ask for Gregory Clark. When they ask what the message is, hang up. Yaz then calls Otto Mostyn and says she has an urgent message. So I don't know if she was trying to get the two of them to meet, but I thought that this was already in motion. Like, I didn't think she needed to add anything. The only thing she's adding is basically getting Henry Muck to be at the club as well to orchestrate them being seen together. But I don't understand what this whole shenanigan was about. Maybe it's possible that Otto Mostyn didn't have the meeting with the British Electric dude. It was supposed to be like on the DL that Otto Mostyn wanted Yaz to be part of this meeting. Like, it wasn't something that was like going through Pierpoint. And we still didn't know why he wanted that in the first place, which is why I think he was orchestrating this whole time. So I think her calling in this cryptic way and hanging up, so they have that it's from Pierpoint, was signaling to Otto Mostyn and then also to the British Electric guy that this meeting is on and she's going to show up. That's the only thing I can think of now. But
isn't she not allowed in the Gentlemen's Club?
She's not. Exactly. So I'm with you.
I don't remember having the same insight of they were going to have this meeting, like that this meeting was already set. So my confusion level is much higher than yours.
So I think that's exactly why
it could be that they were both going to be at the Gentlemen's Club and they needed someone to say, hey, message for Gregory Clark and message for Otto Mostyn to let each other know they're both there at the same time so that they would meet. I don't know. I'm so confused by the whole thing. Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of. But anyway, I have no idea.
Given I can't tell these people apart, which is absolutely terrible.
That's all right.
I'm so confused.
That's
okay,
all right.
Cool.
Okay. So Yasmin says she needs to get off the desk. Shows up at Lumi. She goes to where Henry is, and they're trying to knock on the bathroom door. Robert's there, and Yaz tells him, I need to go in with Henry. And Robert is reluctant to let her go into a bathroom with this man alone, but she's like, I'm fine. I'm a big girl.
Before that, I think there's this, Henry's like, it made me think of that audio on social media, like, nobody's going to know. It's like, they're going to know. Nobody's going to know. Like, that's their conversation. Because Muck's like, everyone's going to know. And Yasmin's like, nobody's going to know. You're fine. So he's still so concerned about perception. He's locked himself in this bathroom and is obviously doing more to harm his perception, but he's so concerned about the perception of him, the perception of the company, whatever. And to your point, Robert is concerned about letting her go in the bathroom with him alone. Remember, he had that protective instinct towards Venetia, which was this whole thing with Nicole being a predator and stuff like that. And we think about like the traditional problems with male clients in a position of power and the junior saleswoman in a subservient role. But what Yasmin has, that's her weapon, basically, is her social standing and her poshness. She can go toe-to-toe with anyone and never feel intimidated in any room she's in. So when she goes in, she actually says very little. Henry's like, oh, this is a sunk cost. Like, just fuck it. Like, I'm so ready to go. And she basically, standing straight up while he's on the floor, looks down her nose at him and gives him a look and basically just uses that facial expression to effectively shame him into getting up off the floor, which I think was such an interesting tactic because all of the wheeling and trying to convince Henry that he's doing the right thing for the company doesn't work, but that works. And she says, be polite, look me in the eye. Telling someone to be polite is such an interesting thing to trigger them to come out of a mental breakdown.
Yeah, seriously. And sorry, really quickly, going back to what you said, you know what I think it might have been? I think that, I don't know. So they then go to leave. They have like their hats on and glasses because they don't want anyone to recognize them as they're going across town. And as they get to the gentleman's club, they won't let Yaz in because, like you said, it's a gentleman-only club. So Yaz tells Robert to go in and make sure that when they all come out, that Otto comes out together with Henry and obviously this Gregory guy. And so Robert asks, do you think that this is going to work? To which he says, this whole thing almost fell apart on a rumor. No reason it can't come together on one. At that point, she then calls the paparazzi and gives them a tip that she saw herself on James Street, which is right where the gentleman's club is. So Henry then walks in. Otto was there meeting with Gregory Clark from British Electric, which again, I believe somehow they're trying to make it seem like Yaz orchestrated. Otto says to Henry that they were there toasting to his failure and asks if Henry knows Gregory. Henry says that this British Electric guy has bid on Lumi more times than he can count. And Gregory says he's a huge admirer of what Sir Henry has built, but he says, I wonder if history will vindicate our decision to step away from negotiations, to which Henry says, with respect, we were never at the negotiating table. Otto then says, well, 4:30, we shall see if Hal's Folly has made any money or whether I have to relegate him from my premiere of godchildren, right?
From the premiership of my godchildren.
Yes,
so he's using a soccer term, like when you get relegated in the Premier League, like he's saying basically like you're going to get like demoted from being godfather.
Love it. So Robert then retorts, he says, or claim his success was simply wisdom inherited from you. Because Robert is still here with...
Why is Robert all of a sudden now coming to Henry's defense? Like, I guess he's had this change of heart after seeing the toxicity passed down through generations of the wealthy, that now he's sympathetic to Muck's cause, I guess. And so Otto then tells Robert to reacquaint himself with the club bylaws. And at that point, you then hear on the TV somebody say, this whole conservative party is a geriatric suicide cult. So Otto then says his name, right, introducing himself like Otto Mostyn, and Robert does the same, Robert Spearing. So they now have gotten acquainted. They all
presumably sit down, have a chat. And then next thing you see them walking out after they've had maybe a drink or two. And so Otto says, Gregory is desperate to become a member. And Henry replies, he'd be happy to propose him because, again, Henry is a member. And then adds, but I think membership here might be a slur on your character. I think there may still be a couple of legacy black shirts on the committee, joking. And so I had to look that up. A black shirt was
what is it? I didn't look it up.
It was a fascist party in Britain. So,
fun.
Yeah, fun. And then Otto says to Gregory that his father, meaning Henry Muck's father, was chairman. And which I'm not sure if they meant of the black shirts or of the club, but I assume it's of the club, which is why he has potentially more sway and influence on that. So Marston then says, I told Gregory that I would blackball him if he didn't give me the skinny on their Q3 earnings. So yay for the skinny on.
I was so excited. I wrote exclamation points next to that. And for those of you who don't know what blackballing is, like blackballing is basically when somebody's applying for membership at a club or something like that. It's like the kiss of death. If you blackball someone, you block their entry into it. It was a great term that was used all the time at eating clubs at Princeton.
So then the funniest thing is, so they're all about to walk outside, which is exactly what Yaz had tried to orchestrate. And for a second, Gregory's like, I have to use the bathroom, which would then obviously totally screw up their plan. So Robert's like, you can't go in there. It's disgusting. And he like pushes him out. So they all go out together as Yaz walks by, and then all the paparazzi are snapping
removes
photos.
Her baseball cap and her sunglasses. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So she is now orchestrating this whole meeting where it looks like potentially Gregory from British Electric is possibly going to make a bid on Lumi, which would then mean acquisition rumors and a potential increase in the stock price, which is
all brokered by their celebrity investment banker being caught in the crossfire.
But I did like her one sentence. She said, gentlemen, I trust the club provided a sanctuary for you to do your best big brain men's only thinking. Otto then introduces Yaz to Gregory as this is the Hanani girl. And Yaz is like, yep, that's me. I'm the Hanani girl. Almost like she went from it being this terrible thing she was hiding from to now she's going to use it to her advantage. And
that's exactly right. She's just pushing buttons to make them work for her.
Mm-hmm. So then back on the trading floor.
Everyone's all smiles.
Everything's gone. Everything's gone well. And Adler says, another day we can chalk up to being on the right side of the market. What was the final P&L? And Rishi says, like kind of jumping in, we're flat. And Anraj says, how is that possible? Weren't you long sterling? And Rishi is quickly just like, no, we finished flat-ish. No profits, no losses. I'm just confused why Anraj is then surprised because Anraj knew about the position with sterling.
Should have been up.
Yes.
But Rishi's lost money on being long sterling. He knows the real P&L is actually worse.
Oh, got it.
Based on what you're
lying. Okay.
Yes. Based on what you were hinting at earlier with his prop trading. I'm reading between the lines of what likely
that makes more sense. Okay. Got it. So Eric then asks, is there something we need to discuss? And Rishi says, flat is the new up, had nothing to do with Lumi, which is true. Although I will say one more thing. They technically would have made more money for the most part, likely if the IPO had not done well because of the green shoe, but
then they would have been
neither here nor there. Yeah.
I mean, I think they're just trying to cue us that something is up with Rishi's trading book between the rash and everything. But what I had wanted to make sure was that I hadn't missed something plot-wise, that I wasn't supposed to know exactly yet where this is all headed. So I feel better about it now.
Yeah. What you said made sense, that Anraj assumed that they were down and that Rishi is lying saying they're flat because he doesn't want to say that he had the sterling position.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Okay. So Adler then says, we were entrusted with the company's safe launch and we delivered a safe launch. Brand enhancing. And Venetia says, at least cosmetically, right? Adler says perception is reality. So at Future Dawn, everyone's happy as well, right? They're
popping champagne. The ladies are awkwardly dancing in their all-female office. So now we know Lumi did indeed close up, which is pretty heroic given where it was trading.
Yeah. So again, back at Pier Point now, Eric says to Yaz, Otto Massa called for you. Some bullshit Italian I didn't understand or write down. And Yaz says the phrase that was the title from episode 1, the early bird gets the worm in Italian. And Eric says to Yaz, I think he made a lot of money today. And Yaz asks, you know what was behind the rally into the close? Eric says early trading kinks ironed out U.S. appetite, some acquisition gossip, right, because of the British Electric thing, that seems to cause some reevaluation of Lumi's fundamentals at the 11th hour. Yaz says, I brokered that meeting, right? She's expecting that.
Proud of herself. She wanted him to know.
Oh, yeah. And so Eric says, why would you do that? And Yaz says, I wanted to give Lumi any help I could into the close. Eric says, you're not solipsistic enough to think it was just you, are you? And Yaz says, it was me.
And
Eric
she's indignant
replies,
now. Like,
oh, yeah.
all of a sudden, she's like, hang on. I jumped through all these hoops. I dragged this guy out of a freaking bathroom. I put myself on the line, allowing myself to be photographed by paparazzi, which has been my nightmare, in order to broker this meeting. I saved the day here. Why aren't you recognizing me for what I did?
Yeah. And Eric says, I'm guessing a random power cut was you too. I was giving you an opportunity to diminish your responsibility. I saw the gossip piece of you cozying up to those titans of industry who also happen to be our clients. It's market manipulation. And Yaz asks, is it? I mean, you're the one who said this business is people and perception. All I did was use my skill set to connect people and let other people perceive. Eric says, I have a laundry list of blind spots. Forgive me, I'm a human being. But ethics in this business, I'm 2020. And Yaz says,
what?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yaz says, Harper led me to believe you value ingenuity. Eric replies, it was a naive thing to do. I don't care about the outcome. You don't have to compromise or degrade yourself to prove your value to me. I don't have to tell you what happens to people on this desk who don't understand the value of a red line, obviously talking about Harper. Yeah. And Yaz says, why don't you talk to me like you talked to me last night, like I'm a human being? And Eric finally says, okay. And he puts this little hat on Yaz while also putting a hat on him in like a fatherly way, kind of maybe similar to like how he was with Harper is I guess what you're maybe supposed to get at.
Remember too, when they were playing with the wigs at the barrister's office the night before on their like coked out binge or whatever. But yes, there is this like little fatherly thing. And she goes like, there he is, right? Like he's back in this like playful, intimate thing. And he says, there she is. And I think there's so much in this little conversation right there to unpack in terms of what Yasmin wants is she wants the same relationship with Eric that Harper had. And Eric is saying all these things about himself and about how he operates that we know not to be true empirically, right? So is it that he wants better for Yasmin than Harper's ultimate demise? Is it that he wants to be better himself? Or is it that he doesn't respect Yasmin in the same way that he respected Harper? And that's what allowed him to be so blind to her red line crossing.
Well, I definitely think he doesn't respect Yaz the way that he respected Harper. I mean, I do think, again, Harper is this, I don't want to say like once in a generation, like not at all, but it's that same Mike from Suits. Yes, the same Mike from Suits quality, like the equivalent of Mike and Harvey, the Harper and Eric. It is that same relationship where she is brilliant. She didn't go to school. And for all that Yaz does, she's not inherently brilliant in the same way. And so
but I thought this was a brilliant move. I thought she did save the day in a brilliant way.
I do think it was all orchestrated by Otto. I mean, that's the whole thing. When Eric says, were you the one who cut the energy? I wonder if somehow Otto did that. And he was placing the chess pieces on the board to get Yaz to, you know what I mean? To like broker this thing.
I think that's a great reading.
That's my guess.
I might be more inclined to feel sold on it if I really understood who Otto was. And these whole first two episodes, this character has been insufficiently developed for me personally, for whatever reason, that like I can't really place him in terms of like how much power he has, where he is in everything. You know, we're being told that he is basically someone who's pulling the strings behind the scenes, right? That he's part of this deep elite, like deep state.
Yeah.
Illuminati. But I just don't get that. It's not coming through enough to me that I can make these interpretations on the fly. But I think that could entirely be true, everything you're saying.
Yeah. Again, they do develop him into this season. So.
I'm excited to see where this goes with him. Yeah. It's just a critique as someone who is studying these episodes in depth that it's not hitting home for me.
In order. I mean, again, this is not something that I would have said the first time. It's upon second watch. All right. So now at the end of this, phone rings again and Yaz answers the phone. And on the other line, you don't hear who it is. You don't hear what they're saying, but you hear her saying she's pretty tired, not sure she has the energy. And then she says, that's very inappropriate. I shouldn't laugh at that. Kind of like, I don't want to say flirting a little bit.
Flirting. No, she's 100% flirting. She's smiling while she's saying this. She's 100% flirting. So we know that someone has called her with what seems like a slightly inappropriate ask and wants to meet up. So then back at Future Dawn, we get the brilliant 1-2 punch of that scene with the inappropriate request to hang out outside of work hours from someone for Yasmin. And we get Harper walking in on two of her female coworkers who are snorting cocaine after hours and all the lights are off. And we hear the off-camera tail end of their conversation. And it's like, she knows that I can't say no, you know? Like, we're office friends, but we don't have to have a relationship at 6 p.m. on a weekday. Do you know what I mean? This is where the show deserves an Emmy, okay? For what is said off camera. Because we've got this theme at Future Dawn of these women imposing these inappropriate relationships of intimacy on other women. We've got the brilliant contrast of that to the inappropriateness of the male CEO locked in the bathroom and the female saleswoman going in, or what's clearly, obviously, anyone can guess, the male CEO calling Yasmin to meet him for a drink afterwards, because who else would it be at this point?
What's really interesting too is I had written down that like there was almost parallels of the Yaz Harper relationship from like the last couple seasons where it was like Yaz saw Harper as this close friend and like she meant so much to her, and Harper was kind of like, I work with you, we're not that close. And so there was a little bit of that, which is interesting because, and we're gonna get to the end of the scene when like Harper is actually on the boat with Yaz and seems to be almost like helping her for real. So I do wonder if they're trying to paint this shift in the relationship with Yaz and Harper. But again, there was so much of that where like Yaz always wanted this relationship with Harper and saw her as like a BFF. Remember, she like got her this like book and like all this stuff, the journal, and Harper just never reciprocated that. It was this like unrequited friendship. And we don't know if it's Anna that they're talking about or if it's some other girl at the office, but
it doesn't matter. It's the nature of these female relationships in the workplace that they're really dissecting and tearing apart and tearing to shreds.
Yeah. And the other interesting point is there was a book recently called Serious People or Not Serious People. I forget what it is. I think it's Not Serious People, but the Facebook dynamic and how like
is that a nod to the Succession line?
It might be. Oh, hold on. Careless People. Oh, never mind. Sorry. There's a book called Careless People.
I read a book called Not Serious People.
Yes. Well, this one is a nod to The Great Gatsby, The Careless People.
Oh, yeah.
But about Zuckerberg and people who are in power always get yes men around them, and you don't really get people that push back at all. And I was listening to this really interesting conversation about AI and how the AI won't push back on you. So for people who have like regular relationships and you have a husband or a wife, they're not going to always want to listen to you. They might have other things, might be preoccupied. The AI will always listen to you. Anyway, so totally off topic. After the conversation.
Harper sees the cocaine, by the way. And she goes, is that sustainable? I fucking laughed out loud. I thought that was amazing. And it's the recycling Nazi from the first episode who was like, you need to wash out the cup or whatever. And she goes, oh yeah, this is woke Coke. So the vials are perishable and the supply chain leads to a family-owned boutique cocoa farm just outside of Lima. I mean, just absolutely hilarious. She's like, no, obviously it's not, right? Whatever. And the girls like go off to celebrate at some bar. And Harper looks not only disinterested, but like actively disdainful and disgusted by these women. Like she wants nothing to do with them.
Well, they're awful. And so after the girls leave, Petra walks out of her office and asks Harper to follow her to her car and then asks what she thinks of the Eagles, to which Harper goes, the football team? Because it's like the Philadelphia Eagles.
What is that a code name for? Because there's a ton of funds with the name Eagle in them. But because Harper said what like the football team, it made me think of Philadelphia. So I was like, what's a big fan? I was like Susquehanna because I thought of it like the Yankees and Shogun and stuff like that. But I had no idea what this was. And Eagles was not ever a code name for any account that I knew of when I was on the street. And I was curious if you knew. I know your husband's an Eagles fan.
Yes, from Philadelphia. Yeah, no, I didn't. But to your point, because she then tells Harper that she's considering other offers. So she's trying to ask Harper what she thinks of this potential fund, but like, we don't know who it is. Harper then asks what her next move is. And Petra's like, there's numbers for interesting parties. She says, Lumi working is only temporary. Like Anna's misjudgments are, they're big, but they haven't sullied me yet. I can still point to my own book. And Petra then unlocks a Hummer, or I assume it's a Hummer because it's clearly
I think it was a G-Wagon.
Okay. She says, Anna hates I drive this. Obviously she wants one, but her personal brand won't allow it, going back to the same point, which is like everything is a facade. And Harper says, maybe you should consider working for yourself. Petra says, yeah, but marketing has never been my strong suit. I want to work with someone whose thinking isn't confined by the orthodoxy of our times. Someone who doesn't want to be cosseted by an institution, but who wants to build their own. And Anna stymies debate. But I'm a fan of the dialectic.
So what Petra's saying is she's like, I like the debate. I like the rigorous vetting of ideas and not just being wedded to any one philosophy. And Harper says, I don't think there's one true way of doing anything. I think there are people, circumstances, and opportunity. So what Harper is communicating to her is, I have no sacred cows. Whatever the opportunity is, I will take advantage of it. And I'm willing to manipulate and push these different buttons. I'm willing to manipulate circumstances. I'm willing to take advantage of opportunities. And people are just part of that picture. And so that's why at that point, Petra asks her point blank how she got an off-market price on CDS. And I want to go over this because part of this is real and part of this is fabricated. So Harper says, he was junior, a bit green, but the kicker is I did have inside edge. Pierpoint don't, and I like how she used that as like, instead of saying Pierpoint doesn't, I thought that was interesting that she said it's the part, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Pierpoint don't provide live prizes for their oil and nat gas graphs for juniors. So he was always pricing 15 minutes behind us. So I actually asked a credit trader if this is true. Do firms not provide live pricing for their junior traders? And the answer is often yes, actually. Live feeds cost more than stale feeds, right?
Wow.
So think about this. Like when I go and I like look at CNBC or something like that, right? I'm not looking at like live actionable traded prices. I'm looking at stuff with a lag, right? And so the same way, if you are very junior at an investment bank, you might not be given live prices. If you are making markets though, and you are calling out actionable prices, that's a huge problem. Now, credit default swaps and baskets of credit default swaps, that's not something you can see on a Bloomberg screen. That's not something you would see just ticking up and down. There is something called SDR, which is the swaps data repository. And that was something that was implemented post Dodd-Frank to report where things are trading. So if he was looking at a graph, he would most likely be looking at a graph of the equities of the actual company names that are in that basket. And then saying, okay, well, these names are, I don't know, whatever. Like he's not seeing that those names are trading down, therefore wouldn't raise the price of buying protection on those names. But so just to be clear, there's a little bit of fudgery here where like she wouldn't see like it's at 200, like it's at 201, the same way you would with a stock. These are bespoke over-the-counter instruments.
Got it. Well, so Petra then says, we don't need to cheat. We just need to be better than everyone else. There's nothing cruel or inhuman about rational selfishness, but I don't like how much pleasure you just gleaned from telling me that. You need to leave whatever personal animus you have against your former employer at the door. Set fire to it, okay? And then she rolls down the window and says, oh, by the way, I know you didn't graduate. I'm starting to think higher ed is a bubble. And then she drives off saying, good night. And so I
love Petra. Petra, again, is Harper that everything could be. Petra wants to win, but she doesn't want to win by cheating. Whereas Harper doesn't have that red line. Petra has red lines.
Yeah.
And she just wants to be the best. And she wants to get there the right way. And I also love the contrast between Petra and Muck. Because we've been told that Muck is all vision and all fundraising and all marketing, but has no substance. Petra is like, I don't want to start my own fund because I'm terrified of marketing. I don't want to do the fundraising bit. I don't want to go around asking people for money. I just want to trade, right?
Yeah.
She is a classic trader. And that is everything that Harper should be, could be, would be if she didn't have this dark side to her. And it's couched as animus towards her former employer because Petra doesn't know the entire story of like the deep problematic past with Eric. I'm glad that we can do away with the graduated or not graduated plot line. But what Petra is effectively communicating here, as far as I read it, is she's like, you know what? Clearly you're brilliant. Clearly it doesn't matter that you didn't graduate from some Ivy League school, right? So she's building her back up a little bit with that final line. But I think I admire and respect Petra for everything that she is. She is exactly who she says she is.
Well, and again, it's now planting the seeds that Harper is trying to encourage Petra to go out on her own and like possibly take her with her. So okay, so now this is the final scene. Yaz walks into some fancy restaurant, and who do we see? We see Henry there. So she walks up, she says, I'm guessing the board didn't replace you, saved by the price. And so he's like eating, and she says, I assume you didn't invite me here to watch you eat. And he says, no, I invited you here to seduce you. And so Yaz asks how he got her number. And Henry says, I don't know if you know, but my uncle owns a few newspapers, which she obviously did because she was introduced in the last episode, but still. So he then changes the subject and says, my dad would have enjoyed this. You know, he used to say to me, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, so people are going to assume you're an idiot. He then starts quoting comments. He says, pathetic attention-seeking whore. I don't blame her for the sins of her father. She's unbelievable. And Yaz is sitting there like, what the fuck? Like, you said you wanted to invite me here and now you're quoting these like horrible things that people are saying about me in the press. So again, watching this, I'm like, what is he doing? And he says, that last one is the only one I agree with. I assume you've been refreshing the comments on the article like a lunatic, which goes back to him kind of like refreshing the stock price like a lunatic himself. And Yaz says, that may have crossed my mind. Henry says, have another look. And so she pulls up the article and it was taken down. So Henry says, I had a word with my uncle. No one's ever going to see that image again. So he now sort of thinks he's this like white knight, whatever.
He's
like
given her a gift.
Yes.
And I mean, she sheds a tear of gratitude at this. Like clearly she is relieved.
Yes. So she starts to drink some champagne, kind of chug it. Tears rolls down her face. And then she gets up.
You know why she's chugging the champagne.
Why? Oh, yes. Oh, good point. So she starts to chug champagne. She needs to get fluids into her body. And then she gets up and she nods her head to the bathroom for Henry to follow her. And so as they get into the bathroom, there's a mirror. She looks at herself and she says, look at me. And she says, now look at you. That's why this is never going to happen.
It also reminds me exactly of the scene of her and Robert. If you remember the scene in the gym where they're in the mirror and she won't let him touch her. This is the same level of power that she exhibited over Henry in the bathroom during the first encounter that they had when she looks down her nose at him. She's wielding her social power and her standing and her beauty over him and saying, you're not good enough to be with me. But then she gives him the gift of letting him hear her pee because she is pushing the button of muck because that's something she knows is important to him.
Well, it's funny. She is so good at manipulating people. Like she is very good at wielding that power, but
manipulating men for sure.
Men, I should say. Yes. So Henry just sort of is standing there. And then next you see her walk out of the bathroom and Henry is gone. And so she goes up to the table and there's just a bottle of wine there. And a waiter comes up and says, Madame, the gentleman has paid the bill. He left you a bottle of wine that he brought himself. Sorry if I'm overstepping, but I didn't know there was a bottle of this particular vintage in the UK. And she then asked him for a bottle opener. And the waiter's like, no, ma'am. Like you don't drink this. She goes outside. She takes the bottle opener. She opens it. Meanwhile, the waiter and like some other people are standing, like watching through the window, horrified that she's doing this. She opens the bottle and she just chugs a sip of wine out of it, just like drinking like you would from a like bottle of vodka if you're an alcoholic type thing. And
I was thinking like a bottle of beer, but sure, bottle of vodka like an alcoholic.
Well, no, usually when you see like alcoholics, it's the image.
I'm just messing with you.
And as she's chugging that, there's then a flashback to her on the yacht. And so Yaz's dad walks out and says to her, I'm sorry you had to see me like that, like flashing back to this point where she saw her father having sex in her bed with some pregnant yacht worker. And Yaz says, how am I supposed to sleep in that bed now? Is that your kink? It's not enough you fuck people up when they're outside the womb. You fuck them up when they're in as well. Why did you make me come here? Are you trying to torture me? And her dad says, I need to tell you something. I've run out of rope. If I go back to London, I have to face criminal proceedings, potentially with ruinous financial implications. And Yaz is like, why are you telling me this? Are you trying to implicate me? She says, the kindest thing you could do for me is to turn the boat around and let me go home. And her dad says, you came here. You love me. He then pins her down. And she, meanwhile, she spits in his face, calls him pathetic. And then he basically takes a glass of wine, throws it in her face. And he says, yeah, and you still come home to me again and again and again. And then it flashes. This is still on the yacht, only now she's above board. This is like the one where her smoking, where they like the paparazzi had got that photo of her. So she's outside again. She's sort of cleaned up, but she's crying. And Harper walks over with a glass of champagne and hands it to her.
We had
and says,
no idea Harper was on this yacht until now. So this is a big reveal.
Yep. She says, you need to stop crying. The pregnant yacht worker comes up and says, I've been looking for you. And Harper says, yeah, we've been having a session in our room. And the woman says, I just want to apologize for what you might have seen. Your father and I had a very, and Yaz cuts her off. She's like, it's okay. I know what my dad is like. And then it flashes back to her drinking from the bottle. And then next it cuts to her on a bus. And you then hear someone taking photos of her. Because again, obviously they're going to sell them to the paparazzi. She then drops the bottle. Like, so again, it's this like massively expensive
Splashes
bottle.
Up in her face. So she has red wine in her face again, like she did when her dad threw the wine in her face.
Yes. And then runs off the bus.
And they have Girls on Film by Duran Duran Kid, which I thought was good music. But
Nice.
that scene, the physical altercation between Yasmin and her dad on the boat, it's interesting because you had the physical altercation between Robert and Muck, and they're actually physically punching each other and like strangling each other, but it didn't feel scary or violent. There was nothing other than like shoving in this scene, but it was so viscerally upsetting. The sight of this otherwise like naked man in a bathrobe mounted on top of his daughter. And just I thought she deserved an Emmy Award for like taking that glass of wine to the face. It looked so upsetting and real, and it felt very violent. And I thought that was brilliantly acted by the two of them. I don't know if you had the same reaction. I was like, actual physical violence in this show seems hokey and stupid. This is so much more sinister and felt very upsetting to me.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I agree 100%. And that's the end of the episode. And I do want to say one more thing. We're recording, it is July 28th, 2025. We talked about how I think the writers get these inspiration from certain stories. And I sent this to Jen, and I'm not going to like share anything more, but there are parallels to like the Epstein story and Ghislaine Maxwell. So I'm just putting that out there.
In that scene with that?
Not in that particular scene.
In this season, just generally?
In this season, yeah. And it's not going to be what you think either, necessarily.
Oh, okay.
It's not going to
necessarily
be
there's been so many references to that moment in cultural history, which was old and is now new again or whatever, in the last season. So I'm interested to see where that goes, I guess.
But like I said, it is not going to be what you think it is. It's not the story that you know. There was some detail that I found out that I was like, holy shit. So anyway.
Okay, so who are we bullish and bearish on?
I mean, Harper bullish, 100%. Harper and Petra. Like,
yeah, I love Petra. I'm
that dynamic duo.
With Petra. I like want to, whatever, skin Petra and wear her as an outfit. Can we get rid of Robert? I'm done with him.
I mean, you only have a few more episodes to go.
So. I'm so annoyed. But does he have a redemption arc in this season?
I mean, he plays a role that I think you will appreciate, I guess.
All right, say no more.
He's a positive addition in certain ways. So yes, I'm going to say yes.
And also I have my little like sexy salesman moment with Bill Adler, which like
You are so funny. Well,
this was fun. 2 hours, girl. We flew through
it. Hell yeah. I budgeted for 3, so this is a win. Well, thank you guys. So we'll try to be finishing up this season. I mean, we're going as fast as we can. So hopefully this will be out.
Episodes left.
I know.
And
only 6
HBO
episodes.
needs to get their act together.
Yeah, then they're going to be the missing link. Yeah. We say this all the time. We get so many people asking us like when we're going to release the next one. So this will be out early August. And then in a perfect world, we'll hopefully get the next one out in like a couple of weeks. So,
and for those of you who like this kind of commentary and analysis, once we're done with industry, we'll free up a ton of time for us to do this more regularly on the big podcast, which we used to do. We used to do deep dives. We did a deep dive into Succession. So we still need to do Succession season 4. We've had requests from guys to do The
Billions.
Wolf of Wall Street, to do, Billions. Yes, I still need to do Billions. So there's tons of movies and shows and things like that we'll do. We'll do Wall Street. We'll do all the old classics. So,
and we need to book-wise do Barbarians at the Gate because we did Going Infinite. We've also done some books. So we did Going Infinite about Sam Bankman-Fried, and I do want to do, again, Barbarians at the Gate. Oh, and we did Caesar Palace Coup, which is another good book. So
awesome. Okay, well thanks guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.